friends, and welcome to the Co-Regulated Canines podcast. I'm Ashley Cipoletti, your host, and I'm on a mission to create more connection. Dogs are really just the starting point. Together, we'll explore how to live with more harmony, ease, and healing so we can show up more as the best version of ourselves, not just for our dogs, but also for our community and our planet too. So grab a coffee and let's dive in. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode where I interviewed world-renowned aggression expert Michael Shikashio. That was truly such a treat. If you haven't had a chance to listen to the episode, I highly recommend going back and listening to it after this one. It was probably one of my favorite episodes to date, and also huge professional milestone, I will say. So stoked. And I think it brought up a lot of questions that my audience had about like figuring out pain in dogs. And it seems like that was just kind of the hot topic from that episode and in general. So I figured let's dive into that a little bit deeper for today to help you really grasp this concept big picture and catch the signs early and start applying that with either your own dog, or if you work with dogs, your clients' dogs, or even if you work in the zoo community or things like that, just start to think of behavior in this way, because it can be really, really crucial, especially when we work with animals. I really started digging deep into this concept when I was kind of obsessed about dog behavior. I was like reading all of the books, going to all the seminars, listening to all the podcasts, like any content I was consuming at this time of my life was pretty much about dog behavior. And kind of the hot topic at the time, I feel like it was one of the first times people were really noticing or identifying the like pain behavior connection, or maybe not the first time, but it was really like entering the more popular narrative in this space. And simultaneously, I was also going through my own pain and trying to learn more about that and like understanding all of that. So it's this parallel, and so many of my learnings have been, again, this parallel between learning about things with dogs, learning about things with people, or my own experience, and seeing these parallels and connections. So my hope is to kind of bridge this for you. So taking the science and applying it to our practical real lives, and sharing real life stories. And I also I'm obsessed with self-help and mindfulness and that whole space too. So I really like to take the science, the woo-woo, and the practical and mesh it all together. So different people who learn differently, or maybe you take different nuggets from it and can apply it to your own life is my hope. So with pain, obviously, if you ever think about a time that you were in pain, it makes sense. You're crabby, you're irritable, you're like, don't come near me, your behavior would change. And we have, the pleasure of using our voice to communicate a lot of our own boundaries, or many of us do, whereas dogs obviously do not. So oftentimes their subtle ways of communicating that they're uncomfortable or in pain are missed. On top of that, also adrenaline comes into play. And what adrenaline does is it's a really good like masker of pain. So some dogs will actually seek out adrenaline producing activities to mask or act as like a natural pain management or pain reducer. So this is why a lot of times when people are like, my dog can't be in pain, he's always running at the dog park or always wants to play fetch, that doesn't mean that he's also not in pain. The two can be true at the same time. And also sometimes if something has historically been super, super fun and rewarding to you, you're going to want to do that more than if it's something you either feel neutral about or don't want to do when you're in pain. And this happens with people too, of suddenly, somebody's got a backache and it pops up at only the times where they really don't want to do something. But if it was like going to their favorite concert or, I don't know, Disney World or something like that, suddenly the pain's not as much of a part of the conversation. So both of these things can be true of like, okay, there's natural pain reducers that come up when, again, we are seeking adrenaline activities, especially in dogs. And also if the underlying motivator that has been historically reinforced over and over and over again is high, then it's kind of like, you're like, well, it's worth it. It's like I can count on probably both hands how many times, especially in college, I would go out to parties like sick as a dog because I knew the party was going to be worth it. Obviously, this was pre-COVID. Now that'd be like, oh my God. But and then if I was like, oh, I have class, like, I'm so sick, I can't leave bed. So thinking about it, that didn't mean I wasn't actually sick when I was going out, but the motive was different, and it made me want to like kind of push through it more. It felt like it was more worth it, as opposed to if doing something I didn't want to do. It was like, oh no, that will feel way worse. So thinking about this again with our animals, their subtle signs of pain are often missed. So commonly it can show up as like hesitation. That's a big one. And I feel like honestly, one of the easiest ones to see is hesitation to go downstairs, hesitation to get up, hesitation to come when called. This is really big. I see it with my own dog. If she's comfortable and I want her to get up, when she was younger, I could be like, Sadie, come, and she'd get right up, come running. Now she won't, unless I crinkled a little treat bag, she'd pop up, come running in. So again, that's where the motive is there. She loves that crinkle bag sound has been reinforced with food numerous times her whole life. It always means treats are coming. That concept actually is what we really try to do when we do marker training, is pairing the word yes with food always, that we get that excitement when the dog hears the yes, similar to how excited they get when they hear the crinkle bag. But anyways, that's one way it can show up, is that hesitation. And then also keeping in mind, it might not always be there if they're really excited about a reward of some sorts. Another is if they hesitate actually when you ask them to sit. This is a really, really common one I see. And I've unfortunately seen people punish their dogs for not sitting or not complying because of this. And I see it as a clear sign of pain. And a lot of times, if you ask a dog to sit on a slippery surface, they won't. And then if you go over on a carpet and ask the dog to sit again, many dogs suddenly will. So it's a good test of like, ooh, slippery surfaces are kind of making their paws spool out to the sides, which puts a lot of pressure on their joints. And if they have nerve pain or arthritis or other injuries going on, that can flare that up. So a lot of dogs will avoid slippery surfaces or avoid sitting when asked on the slippery surface, or they might go straight to a down, or you just might kind of get an interesting or funky response to known cues if you're on a slippery surface versus the carpet. Same with if you're putting on harnesses or equipment. I always like to look at what is the surface that the dog is standing on, and can we make them more comfortable if it's carpeted or like a little rug. So that's a big one. And again, thinking back big picture, if we're punishing dogs for not complying and not getting curious of these things, you can see how ethics would kind of come up if you were aware of that. Like, imagine I'm punishing my dog who's just saying like, that really hurts to do a position. I don't think any of us would want to do that. I've seen this with young dogs too. And we often think because they're a young dog, they cannot have pain, or arthritis is only an old dog's disease. And that's actually not true. They're finding more and more as studies come out that many dogs are getting arthritis at 6 months old, and a lot of those signs are popping up. And about 1 in 5 was the most recent research I looked at this. 1 in 5 dogs have osteoarthritis. And for larger dogs, that's going to be even bigger, that percentage. And they're showing now that a larger dog that's about 8 years old, 80% of them have arthritis. So really start to think, could that be true? And again, hesitation is one big major sign. Another even can be as you're petting your dog. If you had the luxury of having them when they were a puppy or a younger dog, and as they age, you might have noticed that they feel different as they get older when you pet them. For example, with Sadie, she used to feel much more just like sturdy and robust and muscular. Now when I pet her, she feels a little bit more bony and weak in some areas, especially in her like shoulders and her hips. Also, when you go to pet them, they might have fur pattern changes, meaning all of the fur might be going one direction and then suddenly like sticking out to the right. And especially if you had, again, your dog its whole life, you might notice, wow, that's weird. She's got this cow lick all of a sudden. That's usually from the muscles and the skin tensing, causing the hair to grow in a different direction. And it's tensing usually because there's pain or inflammation there. So it's another thing to look for. And as you pet your dog down their spine or down wherever, if you see flinching in their skin, if you see lip licks or they're turning their head towards you, those are other, honestly, bigger signs that they're uncomfortable. And dogs that are more prone to growling, snarling, snapping, biting, or the pain is more severe, that tends to be where bites happen, is touching those areas. And more often than not in dogs, it's going to be towards their hind end. A lot of dogs have like hip dysplasia or arthritis that pops up in that hind end area. So just be aware of that. And if you notice, hey, anytime I've touched my dog there, if my kid touches my dog there, the dog kind of snaps or growls, my first indication would be there's likely some pain there. You might even notice these types of dogs, you'll go, okay, I'm going to take them to the vet, and suddenly they act normal. That is usually a combination of dogs wanting to mask their pain, to not show vulnerability, to not get injured or picked apart in the wild. It's instinctual. And also, if they're nervous, there's the adrenaline aspect, so that would act as a natural pain reliever. So if you notice these things I'm talking about at home, videotape it and then show that to your vet. That can be so helpful in trying to get to the root of these issues. If you have a good vet, they will help almost be like a detective with you. And oftentimes, you might have to do further diagnosing or imaging, but if you have these videos showing some of this stuff, it can be so helpful. Same with if you notice your dog's gait is off. This one I feel like is probably trickier for the average person. But if you have experience in looking at animals' gaits or observing changes, I feel like people in the horse community are, in general, pretty good at this. But, if you notice that, again, getting a video of your dog walking, trotting, pacing, whatever the movements are that you're seeing that gait change, and showing your vet that can be helpful. Super quick, some common ways you can notice in their gait that they might have like hip dysplasia or maybe just some discomfort going on is if they do bunny hopping in their back legs. So the two back legs are resembling kind of those bunny hop movements when they run. If their butt is swaying a lot, Sadie's got this. It's kind of like, sometimes I make jokes about it where it's like you could sing a little like rap song about her butt, but actually it's usually very common with hip dysplasia of it swaying left and to the right kind of more dramatically. And then I just noticed this too, like just stiffness in a lot of dogs, sometimes even in their tail carriage, it just doesn't look like it's flowing in this rhythmic pattern. It looks like rigid and uncomfortable and stiff. And I think if you're unsure, get a video, and it wouldn't hurt. And you can even Google, they have videos of this on YouTube too, like what dogs' natural gaits should look like. And then you could like compare your dog's gaits from the videos you took to those videos of like what their natural gaits should look like. And that could be a useful clue as well. Another subtle but not so subtle sign of pain is hair loss and licking. So if there's certain areas of your dog that is missing fur, that can be a really, really common sign of pain or discomfort there. Sometimes it's from allergies or yeast, and other times it's from pain. So get curious of that. And if it's like really like red and inflamed and their whole skin's really inflamed, that also is painful and uncomfortable. So if we have a dog with behavior issues coming up and they have red, itchy, flaky skin and they're itchy all the time and uncomfortable, that's a huge contributing factor to irritability, because you have to think they're probably not sleeping great and they're always uncomfortable and always itching. How awful that would feel if that was you. So thinking too, dogs like that, I'm like, I don't go straight into the training. I'm like, we need to heal the skin and calm some of this inflammation down in the system first, which I, as a trainer, cannot do. So I recommend talking to a vet or an integrative vet, or looking into nutrition as medicine for your dog, and kind of going in either one of those directions for that type of thing. Another very sneaky one that I've actually seen with numerous clients of mine are cracked teeth. And this is very common. There's kind of a controversial, I don't know the word I'm looking for. It's controversial in the space between trainers and vets, because vets will say, don't give your dog hard chews like a bully stick or anything. If you can't push your finger in it, don't give it to your dog. And usually trainers or behaviorists will come in and be like, your dog needs to chew to satisfy like their needs as a species, to reduce anxiety. Some breeds need it more than others, but it can be like hugely helpful in a behavior plan. And some dogs go through those soft chews in 5 seconds, and we need that dog chewing for 10 minutes plus. So yeah, that can be a tough one, because it's like we don't want to recommend things that could injure the dog, and also we want to meet the dog's needs. So at least how I address it is I share the risks with owners, say this is what's going on. If we can find a way to get the dog licking and chewing and working on something for 10 plus minutes, and it's not something that's super hard, great. Or can we look for just like a little bit safer chews than, the average, bully sticks, what have you. But some people are very comfortable giving their dogs that. And I feel like that's okay. And just having them be aware that cracked teeth can sometimes pop up, to be mindful of that, to have at every vet check, them check their teeth for that can be helpful. But yeah, that one is much more subtle and sometimes can impact eating behavior, sometimes not. I've seen where some dogs don't want to eat dried kibble all of a sudden. I've also had some cases where they eat it just fine. And I've had, when we've solved the cracked tooth, I've had this with at least 4 clients now, the reactivity went away. So it's not something I'm checking in my clients. I don't go in their dog's mouth. I'm like, hey, we don't have that rapport. I'm not doing a vet check myself, but it is something that, if I notice reactivity or aggression, I talk about it and I go, let's look into this. Let's check these things out. And I'll ask some questions. And sometimes there is some funky, avoidant behavior, or we find out, the dog prior to adoption was a street dog, and it's very common that they might eat rocks or things that are harder on their teeth. So that would signal to me it's much more likely that dog might have a cracked tooth. So that's one thing to look into. I had another client, actually, a reactivity case, just adopted, and I met her and she was just so flat, like nothing got her super excited. And if it did, it was like only for a second, and it just seemed weird. They said this dog was 2 years old and she was acting like a 10-year-old dog. I was like, this is odd. And unresponsive on walks, and just would kind of like bark and lunge and want to sniff and do nothing else. And we looked into that. I was like, I just feel like there's got to be something medical here. Like, she was not interested in any food we were giving for more than 1 second, and not interested in toys, not interested in affection, not interested in honestly anything. And then we found out she had like a level 4 heart murmur. She had a cracked tooth. She had arthritis. She had like a injury as well to her. I think it was like one of her back legs. She had skin atopic dermatitis. She had all these things that were impacting, obviously, her mood. And I was like, we can't, move on with training. It's not going to be effective. We're just going to really be sitting here talking conceptually until some of these things get resolved. And then they did. And a lot of times when these things get resolved, you don't hear back from clients because the issues have been resolved or they're still working on it. So if you're a trainer out there too, just keep that in mind, that sometimes some flexibility in your training plans or coming up with policies to address that can be helpful. And then another thing too, for dogs that are not spayed, heat cycles can influence behavior. This is by no means my expertise, and I want to look more into this because I've had this come up actually now several times. But of the heat cycle influencing their stress tolerance going down. So things that would have bothered them anyways, their tolerance for it is shorter and smaller. And I can relate to that, let me tell you. So makes sense. But if you are a male listener, you might not understand what that feels like. So keep that in mind, that if you have an unspayed female dog, that also contributes to irritability, stress tolerance, and their behavior and mood might change around their heat cycle. And I'm also not convinced that it just has to be, oh yeah, like sometimes they're in pain with it. I think it's kind of brushed aside. This is my own personal narrative, but similar to in human medicine, I feel like vet medicine is always following human medicine. And historically, we have not given a crap about women's health, and go, oh yeah, it's normal to have pain and all of this with it. And there's nothing we can do, just take an Advil. And it's like, no, there are things we can do if you learned and looked deeper. And there are things you can eat to help reduce inflammation. There's lifestyle adjustments. There's a lot that you can actually do. So I would say and argue probably is true for dogs too, if you're noticing lots of discomfort. And I bet the science just has not caught up to it yet. And that is why, again, I love connecting all these dots, because science is so helpful, gets us so far. And I think there is some strength to personal anecdotes and stories. However, that without the science and the education sometimes can do more harm than good, depending on your perception, and also your personal experiences in life, the things you're learning, like all of that, I think is really helpful to bring to this space. And I don't know anyone else who's doing it. I feel like it's either super technical or super just broy or like made up and nonsense. And I'm like, can we just like kind of mix? I want to just pull things from human medicine and psychology, the dog world, like behavior world, I don't know, all these big pictures, conservation and nutrition as medicine. I think it's all connected. So I hope that these just plant little seeds in your mind of, let me look into that more. Because I think it's fascinating and I get very curious of it too. Another interesting thing I have seen recently, I had a client who the dog jumped out of a 2-story building, I believe it was, before we started working together, out of more like high arousal. He's like a young, dog that was just being kind of a derp and didn't have the awareness that obviously you'd get injured from that. And he recovered from it seemingly they were like, oh my God, we were so scared. And we looked at him and he was fine. He wasn't limping, like he was good. So they kind of just left it there. But then I noticed anytime they touched his back, he would head whip and mouth, but like it was like puppy mouthing, even though he's like about a year old. That can also be a symptom of pain we know that history, right? It seems obvious when you lay it out like this, but when you're living with a dog that's that young, it might not. So that kind of like head whip and mouthing your hand, I think is in dog world probably more polite. But dogs that might be more irritable, a little older, grumpier, they might be the ones that are more prone to snapping. And this younger dog that was more like goofy, silly, I think more prone to mouthing. But that to me indicated, there's probably some pain there. And this is super interesting. And another topic I want to dive deeper into at some point is thinking about nutrient deficiencies. And again, this is not my specialty, but I hope to share this again to plant the seed in your head to get curious. I had a client that I, at the time, had a mentor who was much more experienced with me in the behavior consulting world, helping me with. And the dog out of nowhere started to growl and posture to bite whenever the harness was put on. And my mentor had a similar case that she worked with years ago where the dog had like a B12 deficiency. So she suggested to check into some of these things with the client, and she did. And it turns out this dog did have that as well. And anytime the harness was clipped on the abdomen of the dog, it was causing discomfort. And once that was resolved, that aggressive behavior went away. So super fascinating. And they said too that the resource guarding the dog was doing went away. And so it got me thinking, I'm like, yeah, if your body wasn't feeling fully satisfied or like complete, or if just internal systems aren't working as they should, irritability could go up, or you could, again, it would be like having a thirst that can't be quenched. It might obviously impact your behavior. I also think on the flip side, a lot of us humans are walking around nutrient deficient. Like, who do you actually know that is eating complete, healthy, balanced, like eating the rainbow, eating all these different nutrients every day for all their meals? Most of us aren't. Dogs obviously are not picking their meals, so it's whatever we give them. And a lot of times it's something to think about. It can be influenced by, I think, their early experiences and what mom was eating and the whole birthing process, what they were fed. And nutrition is a study of every body is different. It has probably different unique needs, some generally similar needs. Again, this is not my specialty, but something to think about. And I know in my own journey of my like chronic illness stuff, food has been the biggest missing piece of making me feel better or worse, or sometimes neutral. And from my own experiences with how food can make me feel, I'm so much more curious about it in animals because it is drastic to me. And I didn't know this until I read the book. I've talked about it before, Heal Endo, and I started playing around with it. And I was like, holy crap. I did not realize how many things I was eating that were super inflammatory to my system. And I didn't realize when I feel certain pains, there are certain foods I can eat that then reduce that pain. It is fascinating. So obviously I'm like, how do we connect this? I'm sure it pops up for some animals. And so often they're kind of just like automatically put on hydrolyzed diets without talking about how to actually heal the system, instead of, okay, we're not flaring it up, but like, how do you heal it to be able to eat different foods? And I'm always like, dogs are scavengers. It's odd to me that they would have such finicky stomachs. So if your dog's has a finicky stomach and everything's upsetting them, to me, that's a little bit of a red flag of like, that doesn't make sense for the species. Let's dig deeper. And I would look for either a vet or a vet nutritionist or somebody that would be willing to work with me to actually heal the dog in front of me internally, if I had the financial resources, again, to do so. Okay, so now I'm going to tap into the woo-woo a little bit because it's me and that's what we do here. So throughout my healing journey, I came across this program that kind of like guides you with certain meditations around a given theme. And there was several on like chronic pain. And so when you're doing them, they have you really reflect in that meditation where in your physical body you feel sensations and what that sensation actually is. So you kind of start to actually get curious of like, what really is that? And then as you're kind of doing this like mind to body connection, you can like breathe. You can do certain breathing exercises as well when you're doing it that, I shit you not, reduce the pain when you're doing it. It's almost like you're telling, I don't know the actual science of it, but it's almost as if your brain is telling you, hey, there's a problem here. And when you look at the problem, it reduces the like pain signal going off, I think. And so I've found a lot of peace with that. And then it's doing those exercises struck in me now this internal curiosity of when I feel sensations in my body, being like, let me pay attention to that. What could that be telling me? Or if I just give this some space and breathe into it, how long will this, flare up last? Or again, bringing this curiosity that I'm all about to ourselves and to our own body. And I thought that was a really helpful thing I've learned in that kind of mindfulness practice that helped me out a bunch. And then looking at overall stress reduction, whether this is for you or honestly your dog or a client's dog, of when we're stressed, it often can flare up chronic pain or systems just kind of working in overdrive. I've talked about this in other podcast episodes before. So getting curious too, if you're like, there's nothing I can do, there are different things that you actually can do. And I hope that this sparks optimism and curiosity, because even when things are going terrible, if you can find subtle ways to reduce stress, let's say, I'll talk about myself, for example, it's prioritizing full night's sleep, it's saying no to alcohol, it's reducing caffeine, it's eating foods that I have learned will love me back. It could be deep breathing exercises. I'm going to give more information on that in a future guide and freebie to you all. That was really, really helpful to me, and it won't necessarily help everybody, but if it can help just at least one other person out there, I figured might as well share it. And even trying to just have better boundaries about what is stressing you out and saying no to that and choosing to say yes to yourself sometimes. So when I have these pain flare-ups, I'm much more prone to canceling plans, going home early. I turn into a little hermit crab, and I do what I need to do to take care of me. And when I'm not having a flare-up, I'm going to be Miss Social Butterfly, out there having a ball and even able to eat different foods. When I'm not having a flare-up, I can go out to eat at a restaurant. It's not the end of the world. But when I'm having a pain flare-up, I cannot do that. And you will not catch me drinking. But when I'm not having one, you're going to see me out having fun with my friends. So thinking like that has been really helpful to me to reducing my pain and stress. And again, this isn't diagnostic. This won't be a cure. It's not a quick fix. It is a lifelong journey of being curious of what's going on in you, what's going on in those around you, and recognizing that oftentimes there are things we don't have eyes to see that impact others' mood and behavior. And on that note, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you had any major takeaways, tag me on Instagram at co_regulated canines. That's the letter K, the number 9S. And tell me those big takeaways. Tag me. I'd love to hear from you. And I will see you next week. Thanks for hanging out with me on the Co-Regulated Canines podcast. If you love this episode, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed, left a review, and shared with a friend. Your support helps more people and their dogs find a little more ease and connection in their lives. Want to dive deeper? Follow me on Instagram at Co-Regulated Canines. That's CO_regulated, the letter K, the number 9S, or head to www.coregulatedcanines.com for more resources. Until next time, take care of yourself, take care of your pup, and keep building those connections.